In this video, we're going to look at factor by grouping. You might have factor by grouping if the polynomial has four terms. And the way you'll decide if it does do factor by grouping is you're going to group the first two terms together, and you're going to group the last two terms together, and that's the grouping part. And what you're going to do with those is you're going to find their greatest common factor. So find the greatest common factor of 5 and 10, and that's going to be 5, and then x squared. And the greatest common factor of 3x and negative 6 would be 3. And so you will factor out those GCFs. And so if you take out the 5x squared, you're left with x minus 2. And if you take out the 3, you're left with x minus 2. If this parentheses and this parentheses are the same, then it will factor by grouping. And so your answer will be to take the two GCFs and put them in their own parentheses. And then you write down the common factor, that parentheses that they have, x minus 2. And there you go. If you'd like to check it, it's very quickly checked with the FL method to see if you've made any careless errors. 5x squared times x would be 5x cubed, so the first part checks out. And then the last terms, 3 times negative 2, will be negative 6. If the first terms give you the first term, and the last terms give you the last term, then there's a very high probability chance that you have done this successfully. Let's try one more. Again, we have four factors, so I'm thinking factor by grouping. I'm going to group the first two together and the last two terms together. But I want you to notice this third term. If you always do the first two and the last two, if this third term is negative, you're going to want to factor out a negative GCF out of these two in the back. So 12 and 28, there you have a GCF of 4 and some x's, x squared. And over here, 15 and 35 is 5. But again, I'm going to do a negative 5 because that's a minus sign on the third term. And you'll see why this is important in just a few moments. When I do that GCF, I end up with, when I pull out the 4x squared, 3x minus 7. And when I pull out a negative 5, I end up with a positive 3x and a negative 7, the same inside parentheses numbers, which means I can now put the two GCFs in their own grouping symbol. Now I'm going to do a quick little first times last to see if it works out. And 4x squared times 3x is indeed 12x cubed. And a negative 5 times a negative 7 is a positive 35. Now I'd like to call your attention on problem number 1. The third term was positive, and so I pulled out a positive GCF. On this second one, the third term was negative, so I pulled out a negative GCF. On this one, what would I pull out of these two terms here, a positive or negative? The correct answer is negative because the third term is negative. So these two have a 10, x squared, and these two have a negative 25. So when you do your math, you end up with this. They both say 4x plus 3, and so I put them in the two GCFs in their own parentheses, and I can do again a quick check step. First times first, 10 times 4 is 40, x cubed, and negative 25 times 3 is negative 75. And I feel very comfortable with saying that is my final answer because it seemed to work out. You could do the inner and outer of FOIL. Wouldn't this be the negative 100x? And wouldn't this one here be the positive 30x squared? And so you see how you get all four of the terms. And that is how you do factor by grouping. Again, four terms, group the first two and get their GCF, and group the back two and get their GCF. It has to be the same thing, 4x plus 3, 4x plus 3. If that's true, then you have factor by grouping. If this had been 4x plus 3 and this had been 4x plus 7, this would not do a factoring. It would not be factor by grouping. You would just say it does not factor at all. And that's factor by grouping.